To the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, here we go. Due to the short assembly/Oveus spell schedule today, the afternoon BOCES buses will leave OPHS at 12 p.m. All other BOCES buses will follow their regular schedule. There will be a recruiter from the Army in the Commons during all lunch periods on Wednesday, April 12th. You can talk to him during your lunch period if you are interested, and you can see your counselor if you have any questions.
Attention, all students, please join educational outreach for a brief meeting after school on Wednesday, April 12th at 2 p.m. in room 215. Please see Mrs. Holterman or Miss Adele with any questions. This is news for Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. Today's cycle is 3.
Have a great day, Ranger Park. But before we go, we have a nice special with Mr. Stahl.
Here tomorrow, gone today. Heard a part-time prophet say, life cannot be measured out in years. All the sorrow on display leaves a mark on yesterday. Love forever treasured out in tears. Woe is me, woe is you. Woe are we, what to do? Woe is me, woe is me. Their sacred cows, roast them up for Sunday barbecues. Left to wonder why and how, let them have their holy cows, holy vows mistaken and abused. Woe is me, woe is you, woe are we, what to do? Woe is me, woe is me, woe is you. For in fact In 3 to 5 minutes, the Oveus film will begin. Kids escaping drugs. So 3 to 5 minutes. Stay tuned to QTV. Is that good enough? Woo!
Hey guys, my name's Ronnie. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Buffalo, New York. I grew up in Clarence, grew up in a normal home. I was actually homeschooled from a very young age. I was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way until 4th grade. Growing up was a little different for me. I grew up in a really big family. I'm one of 7 kids, so you can imagine, things could get pretty crazy. Throughout my mom's pregnancy, she never really drank, but before that, she actually struggled with alcohol a lot. Once she stopped having kids, her and my dad started going out a lot more and drinking, and eventually this would cause a lot of problems in their marriage, and it really affected us kids. And it would start to become a burden to us because it felt like their attention was in a different place. I started to kind of do my own thing to separate myself from my family. Started to, be out of the house a lot more, didn't really want to be home around because I knew that, most of the time my parents would probably be arguing about something. And, it definitely put a lot of pressure on myself and my brothers and sisters, and was not a good influence on us. So they eventually started to struggle financially a lot, and my mom ended up having to pick up a second job, and she ended up getting a job as a waitress at a sports bar. When that happened, me and my siblings ended up having to go to public school, and that's where I'd say a lot of the pressure and the problems started. So going through school was, for me, a safe place. I really enjoyed going to school. I was always kind of like an energetic kind of guy, really full of school spirit. everyone kind of knew me for being that outgoing kid. And I started to kind of feed off that attention. I think it was maybe the lack of attention that I got at home that really kept me going and kind of like seeking out that attention that I needed to feel good about myself and fill the voids that I had in my life. I ended up making a couple good friends, and in the beginning, who I thought were good friends, and we started to hang out outside of school, started to go to the park, started to get into a little bit of trouble here and there, but nothing too serious. One day we were at the park behind my school, and we had ran into a couple of his friends, and this kid that I was friends with, he had a lot of older friends. They were all in like high school because he had a lot of older cousins. One of his cousins in particular, distributed drugs, sold drugs here and there, and these were two kids that he just knew kind of by association, and they were smoking weed. And we went up there and we're talking to them, and I hadn't even known at the time that this kid that I'd been hanging out with even smoked, but they lit up the joint, and he took it, and then they offered it to me. So I think at first, when I first started smoking and first smoking weed, I think it was more of kind of me going through like a rebellious phase, an early rebellious phase, because I was so young at the time. I was only like 11, 12 years old. And so I think that was me going kind of through an early rebellious phase. At least it started that way. And, I kind of just was like, okay, like these people like me, these are my friends, this is where I fit in. So I kind of just rolled with it. It was kind of like this happy place outside of school where, I had to look good, had to keep my image good for my teachers, my peers. And this is kind of where I could do my own thing outside of school with these group of people who accepted me and, involved me in things that they were doing. So I felt really accepted, but at the same time, I was hit with that peer pressure, because at the same time, I'm afraid, well, if I don't smoke this joint, if I don't do this, then they're not going to think I'm cool. They're not going to be accepting of me, and now I'm going to have to go and find a whole new group of friends. So, obviously the obvious choice for me was take a hit of the joint. And, this was something that I continued to do throughout middle school. I would continue to smoke, get with my friends after school, smoke, and I didn't see it as a problem. From all the information I was told, obviously you hear, well, no one's ever died from weed, no one's, and, I would kind of use these in the back of my head as excuses to why I should keep doing it. And, while this is all going on, my parents are so distracted by their financial issues and their drinking and stuff like that, they would have never even guessed that, their son in middle school is using drugs. And, I would never go home high at first, because, I didn't want my parents to find out. I didn't want my brothers and sisters to find out. And my eyes would get really bloodshot. My mouth would get really dry. And, I didn't want to be a disappointment, because I knew, even though it felt good and it looked good, it wasn't good, and it was illegal and stuff like that. But, that was always kind of in the back of my head. During this time now, going into, more into middle school and stuff, I really started to get into this cycle of deception and manipulation, and this like lifestyle started to form around me, and a lot of it included, sneakiness. I was really sneaky about it, especially because, you have to pay for it and buy it. I started to manipulate my parents into giving me money, because at this time I didn't have a job. So I would have to talk to them, manipulate them into giving me little bits of money here and there, tell them I'm going to the movie theater, going out to get some food. And, this was how I would get my money off my parents. And eventually it would cause me to start stealing from them. I'd go in my dad's wallet and take 10, 20 bucks here and there, and eventually then it moved on to me taking money from my brothers and sisters. And that's when they really started to kind of catch on. Now, mind you, while I'm going through all this, starting to get into this bad habit, this lifestyle, at school I'm involved, I'm doing things, I was doing theater, I was doing sports, I was very active and involved in school, so no one would have ever had any idea that any of this was going on. And, I would take this to my grave because I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be labeled as like the stoner or, the disappointment in my family, so it was definitely something that I kept in this box, and I started to kind of build this wall around that one area of my life. And, I was very good about manipulating my image, 100%. And, throughout school, this lifestyle started to kind of engulf and eat it was like a virus. It started to kind of eat at, this other life I was living. I was definitely living this double life, and eventually over time, even though I didn't think it was possible or could happen, I slowly started to give up everything I loved. I started to give up the trust of my family, the relationships I had, I lost all trust. Once I started moving on to, more heavier drugs, because it didn't just stop at weed. I always thought I could, I always thought, all right, well, I could just smoke weed, like I'll be good. But that lifestyle, I'm telling you, it introduces you to a whole nother group of people, because, I always tell schools when I speak there, if you're hanging out with people who do sports, you're going to want to do sports. Like if you hang around with people that do music, you're probably going to listen to music a lot more. You're going to, sing a lot more and hang around with people that do music, and you're going to be introduced to different genres. If you're playing sports, you're going to be introduced to a lot of different tactics. But if you're using drugs, you're going to be introduced to a lot of different drugs. And that's just how it is, and that's what happened to me. I was introduced to a lot of different drugs, and I would see the effects that they would give to these friends of mine, and I'd be like, wow, like weed doesn't do that for me. I want to be able to feel what they're feeling. That euphoria. That's really what I started, I think, to become addicted to. That the lifestyle, the money, the people, and the drugs, the feeling, the euphoria of it. And I slowly started to give up all the stuff I loved because of it. I'd be late. I'd show up to rehearsals late. I'd show up to workouts late. And eventually, my coaches, my teachers would wonder, you're a really good kid. You got a lot going for you, but like, what's going on? And, eventually it came to a point where I was like, I'm sorry, I got this going on and this going on. I'd make up all the excuses in the world of why I can't do it, to a point where like I'd try to convince myself that this was the truth. And it wasn't. It was all a lie, 100%. And at this time, my mom was starting to kind of recognize her problem, and, she wanted to get help. And she knew that I needed help as well, because she saw the people I was hanging around with, she saw the stuff I was doing, and, she kind of had an idea of what was going on. So she would start to put me in these outpatient programs, just like counseling. They would drug test me, stuff like that. And, I saw this as an opportunity to kind of, okay, I can do this, gain my family's trust back, and everything will be good, But in the back of my head the whole time, I'm literally manipulating this whole situation in my head. Like, I can gain their trust back and still be able to do the same thing, just be smarter about it so I don't get caught this time. And this was like an ongoing revolving door. Like this was like a constant thing, because I didn't just go to one outpatient program and it was over with. Like I went to a program, completed it, got my family's trust back, and would do the same thing again. And somehow I would mess it up. You know, as I started to get more and more into this lifestyle I was starting to live, I wasn't, you know, causing just little problems anymore. Now, you know, my irritability was starting to rise. You know, I started to get into fights in school. You know, I started to get suspended. I started to get in trouble with the police a lot. And there was one time when, you know, my mom had actually went to an inpatient program, and she had left her car behind. She went to Ohio, and my dad was back with us, and he was doing good. But, you know, he was always so exhausted because he worked. You know, we'd be at school, he would work, and, you know, by the time he'd come home, he'd be ready for bed. And, you know, this I saw as an opportunity to, you know, take my mom's car for a joyride. So, you know, I would literally go outside, no permit, no driver's license, and, you know, I'd steal my mom's car, drive it around, gallivant around Buffalo, pick my friends up. And, you know, I would drive past a cop and look in my rearview mirror, and when I'd see that he wasn't pulling me over, you know, I felt good about that. That gave me like a rush. And, you know, that's what kept me going. You know, I was happy to be with my friends and able to do stuff and not get caught doing it and still be able to have a good time. I felt free, you know, and, at the same time, I was so trapped in this life. You know, I was the complete opposite of free. And it wasn't until I got my freedom taken away that I realized, you know, I definitely had a problem. At this point now, I'm in this home pretty much. It's kind of like a facility, but it's not jail. So that's like all I really cared about. You know, I'm not in jail. That was like kind of something that always kept me going, because my dad would always tell me, oh, by the time you're 18, like you're going to be behind bars, you're going to get locked up. And I would always kind of just like rub it off, you know, because my parents would send me to a home before they ever sent me to jail or anything like that. So during this time I'm in this home, my parents had ended up getting a divorce. And my mom moved to Lancaster, and when I came home, I was at this facility for about a year, completed my whole freshman year there, and came home. And I kind of saw it as like an opportunity for me to kind of have a clean slate, fresh start. You know, I'm going to a new school, I can make new friends. At this time I had a girlfriend, so, you know, that kind of was something that kept me going. I'm older now, I'm making, you know, older decisions, and when Xanax was introduced to me, it was a whole new world. It was a whole new window that I had opened. And, you know, the difference between Xanax and, you know, weed is pretty significant. I would start to black out. You know, I wouldn't know what was going on, where I was. All I would do is want to sleep and close my eyes. You know, I'd slur my words. You know, I'd move really slowly. And then I'd wake up. And, you know, I'd wake up in my bed. I'd wake up on someone's couch. I'd, you know, wake up wherever it was that I dropped. And it was definitely a scary feeling. But I continued to do it. Obviously, like, you hear about kids who overdose on Xanax and, you know, other drugs, but, like, you never think it's going to be you. You never think it's going to be, like, one of your friends or someone you know. And, you know, I ended up having a friend who had overdosed, and he had overdosed a couple times, and I would always wonder, like, you know, okay, like you overdosed, like you almost died, like why are you going back to it? And that's where like the understanding of the concept of addiction kind of comes in. It's like it doesn't matter at that point, you know. It doesn't matter if you actually die and they bring you back to life, you know, that addiction is still there, you know, unless you're willing to get help and willing to, you know, accept the things you cannot change, like they say. You know, that's it. And it's not accepting the things you cannot change in like, I accept the addiction. It's like accepting it and actually going to get help. And this certain person just, you know, couldn't do that and eventually, you know, lost his life. And it affected me, it affected the people around me. So, you know, it is a real thing, and it can happen to anyone. You know, the people nearest and dearest to you. So for me, it didn't just stop there, because to me it was like, okay, like at least that's not me. You know, I can be smarter than that. I can do better than that. It didn't just stop at Xanax. You know, then I got into hallucinogenics and shrooms, and I didn't like it. It was definitely a weird feeling. But, you know, I did it just to be able to say that I did it pretty much. You know, it did a lot of damage to me and the people around me. And, you know, it definitely started to seep through the cracks. You know, people were definitely starting to recognize what I was doing and what was going on. Because I started to give stuff up. I started to give up friendships. I started to give up relationships with my family, with other friends. You know, I started to break ties with programs in school. It was definitely like an image thing. Like, I always made sure to keep my image good. You know, I would always try to stay involved with stuff. Whether it was like a leadership academy, even though I wasn't in it, like you'd still see me outside hanging up posters, going to the powder puff, you know, student section leader for the football team. Like, that's what I did. And that's what, you know, kind of I used to like keep myself reminded, like, I'm just being a normal kid, you know. But behind that wall that I had built, you know, kept inside this box, was a terrible addiction, terrible lifestyle. So here I am, you know, I'm in my junior year now of high school, doing what I want to do, don't really care about anything. You know, looking back from where I was in middle school to now, it was definitely a roller coaster. And I'm finally at a point now where I can balance my reputation, my image at school with, you know, basically getting high, leaving school early, getting messed up with my friends, and also now balancing a job. So to me, you know, I'm just living a normal life, being a normal kid. I'm working, I have a job, so I had all the excuses I needed to carry on with what I was doing, pretty much. And one day, I was in school and I got a phone call from a buddy of mine. He was more of like an acquaintance, but, you know, it was someone who I spent time with occasionally. And he had told me that a certain person had, you know, been running around his area that he was selling drugs to. He was a big drug dealer. And another person he had known of was selling drugs in the same area he was selling, and he didn't like that. He said that there was a pretty good chunk of money involved, and he needed help. He needed my help, and I told him I would. And he had told me to meet him up after I got out of work, and we would figure it out. So after work now, we're meeting up outside of his house. We're in this back area, and we get the kid over there, come up with this plan pretty quick to basically rob this kid. And We didn't care what we'd get. We didn't think anything of it because we figured this kid's just a drug dealer. Like, he's not anyone special. You know, he's not anyone important. But he was a human. You know, he was a peer. He was a person. And we were so faded by the drugs and by that lifestyle that, you know, we didn't care. And we pretty much set this kid up. My co-defendant had a gun. I had a gun. His was real. Mine was fake. But, you know, anyways, our intention wasn't to shoot this kid. You know, we were just planning on scaring him, robbing him, and, you know, we had this plan out in our head. You know, so we figured, all right, it's going to go this way. And when this kid came, you know, last thing we expected was for this kid to, you know, you hear like fight or flight, but most of the time you think like, okay, like you're going to cooperate. But he tried fighting him. He tried fighting my co-defendant for the gun, and the gun accidentally went off, and he shot him in the leg. And it was kind of like a shocking moment for me. Like, I'd never seen anyone get shot before. Obviously, like, you see videos or play video games, but like to see it in person, it was definitely a kind of like eye-opening experience, and definitely scary. But you know, at that moment I knew, you know, I'm done. It's done for. And especially if he dies, you know, now I'm an accessory to murder. And for what? You know, for a bag of weed, a little bit of money, it wasn't worth it. So, obviously, we all know the end game to this story. I ended up getting arrested, and going back to what my dad had told me, you know, about spending my 18th birthday in jail, I literally spent my 18th birthday in jail. And, you know, at this point, everyone knew. My teachers, my peers, my family, there was no hiding it, you know. And I was desperate. I was in this need of desperation. So, you know, my parents thankfully bailed me out, and my mom had started digging in for some facilities, and she came to me with the offer of me going to Kids Escaping Drugs and the Renaissance House. And I didn't really know a lot about it. I had heard about it like from the news and from just like public information, you know, through my school. You know, I remembered that they would always have like the summit. They would always have, you know, the speakers come. And, you know, I was like, okay, like if this is going to help me with court, if this is going to help me with my case, then fine. But that's all I really thought of it for. You know, this is a place I could get into. It'll show the judge that, you know, I'm trying to get help. Not once did it come through my head, okay, like this is going to help me get clean. This is going to help me change my life. This is going to help me mend my relationship with my family. Not once did any of that come through my mind. All I was looking for was a place that I could use to make me look good, pretty much. Help my image. Something that I cared about my whole life. Finally, after some, you know, adults, some older, inexperienced addicts had spoke to me, I was able to start identifying with them a lot more. And, you know, now that I kind of dug myself to the deepest and darkest rock bottom I could have possibly dug myself, it was time for me to kind of just throw down the shovel and give up. You know, and really time to surrender my life to admit that, you know, I have a problem. And even though I had all this pressure with court going on and I didn't know what the outcome would be, I knew that this is where I had to be. And this is what I had to do to prepare myself. I finished the program. You know, I did good. I did all my programming. I got involved with the panels with John, Danielle at the time. She was great. John was great too. And, they really helped me kind of, make this path for myself where I don't have to go back to relying on friends or drugs to fill my voids. There's other things I can do. I became a big brother in the house. They have this buddy system, and I was able to not only impact my own life, but help impact other guys' life in the house as well, and kind of show them that, hey man, this is possible. I came from the deepest depths and was able to climb myself out of this pit. And, unfortunately, I have to say, when I graduated, which I did, I'm really happy to say that I did graduate from the